live. All right, I believe that we are live. This is gonna pop on over to the YouTube page on my side, and I'll need to turn the speaker off so we can eliminate some of the audio feedback. And other than that, I am looking forward to jumping into John C. Maxwell's book, The 5 Levels of Leadership. And today we are at the 5th level, the pinnacle level of leadership. And so I'm excited to bring yet another one of these book review projects to a healthy end. Very, very excited. And I've studied the material, right? I'm John Maxwell, certified in leadership, speaking, training, consulting, all these things. And every time I go through the books, when I'm getting prepared to talk on them or speak on them again, there might be a new thing that I pick up. There might be a new nuance of how the leadership is affecting me. And it's a lot like, folks that read scripture, they'll say, oh, it's living, right? Because every time they read it, there's a new meaning. There's something that pops to them, that communicates to them. And so I would encourage you, if you have been following along for this series in real time, I would encourage you to pop over to the Mañana No Mas Academy once this is loaded up as a course, to kind of go through it again and see if there's more that kind of pops out of the content to you, or an application process. Maybe as you evolve in your leadership, you might come up to new platforms and go, okay, well, here I am at this next platform. I've climbed the ladder to the next platform, and now this is something that really resonates with me, or something that is a value-added thing at that time, right? A lot of these things are dependent upon where you're at in your own processes. And so, as we get closer and closer to the 3 o'clock mark here, and we make things official and I jump into this review, I just wanted to sign in a couple of minutes early and welcome people that might show up early. Encourage you to use the chat box that's off on the right-hand side of that YouTube page, as we're YouTube living right now. YouTube living, I think that's a phrase. But I wanted to encourage you to participate. And if you have questions, bring them up. If you have comments, put them in there. And, provided they're on target, I can go ahead and respond to those. And we can have a little bit more of a dialogue there about what leadership looks like now. When we talk about the 5 levels of leadership, as it's driven out in this particular work, I'm really struck at the idea that this kind of content, is somewhat timeless. There's these laws, these principles, these levels of leadership, they're always present, right? So, if you're brand new to a position and you have positional authority, that's the entry level to leadership with a group of people, right? Then you gain their permission, right? You gain the okay to lead them from them, right? They over time, you build a relationship and you establish trust, and they're like, man, I got to listen to him because he's the boss. But in reality, I kind of like working for the dude, right? And so, that's kind of what's happening there with permissional leadership. Again, I think I made that word up, permissional, right? And then the next phase was, they say it's one of the hardest phases, to go from permissional leadership to productive leadership, right? And that's like, okay, you've got the position, you've built relationships, and you've earned trust. Now, can you get these folks to actually produce at a higher level, right? We're always, it sounds like you're trying to manipulate people. It's not a manipulation game. It's what is the best level of performance that I can gain from a team that wants to do the work, right? So there's a lot at play there in making that a reality. So there is, of course, that. Then we talked about the next stage of leadership, right? And that was people development. That was, being able to take people and develop them and try to build leaders within your team. If you're a leader that can build leaders, think of how awesome that is, right? You're able to not just add to your team, but you're able to multiply through your team. And that, folks, will take us to level 5. Level 5 is the pinnacle of leadership. And as my clock is ticking over from 2:59 to 3 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and turn the music down and let us focus on the content that we have here in front of us. Okay, get that knocked off the screen. Perfect. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Zoom screen, and I'm going to move it to my other screen. That way, if people are signing in or looking to come into the conversation, we'll be able to address that too. Okay, so if you see me darting my eyes back and forth, that'll be me looking at the Zoom screen, and then I've got a little bit of a delay here in the in YouTube Live. Sorry, I don't know what's happening there, but I've got a little bit of a delay getting me over to YouTube Live, but I'll be able to see. So if people join the Zoom conversation with the invite that was shared privately, if people can jump onto that and they've got questions, comments, concerns, or if they want to join the conversation verbally, I'll be able to let them do that. And then for folks that wanted to jump onto the open channel on YouTube Live, you have the ability to use the chat on the right side of the screen and fill in any kind of content that you've got there. Now I've got my video minimized on the YouTube screen so that I can see the chat if somebody adds to that. So just to let you know that that is happening, and I'm maintaining that as we go along. Folks, we are, again, I always encourage people to buy the book. I'm old school. I love being able to flip the page. I like taking a highlighter and drawing across the page, and if you were to take a look at my book, this one in particular became kind of a mess because the highlighter I used would let a lot of ink out, right? And so I got really weirded out by that. But as you can see, I'll draw through a book. I'll highlight what I need. When you own the book, it's yours to make yours, right? So you can make the notes, you can draw on the sidebar, highlight, scribble things out, whatever you need to do. And I like to do that sometimes, especially with books that I know that I'll go through more than once. A lot of the John Maxwell books I'll go through multiple times. Now, unfortunately, there's a couple of books that I really like from John. And every time I start to read them, I get compelled to give the book to somebody else. And so I've got a couple of books that I've never even been completely through yet with John Maxwell, because every time I start them, I get, I feel convicted to share the book with somebody else, and then I give the book away. A lot of these books I'm able to keep and then reuse them kind of like a teacher's edition to go through with you guys. And so this is not my first time through the 5 levels of leadership, but this is the first time that I am taking these videos and I am reformatting them to go into the Mañana No Mas Academy, for which there'll be a full course in there, the 5 levels of leadership that people will be able to sign into and take. Also used as a resource material. If you've been one of the folks that's followed this all the way through, and you want to retake something, or you want to go over like the 3rd level of leadership or the 5th level of leadership to have a goal to attain to, right? You can sign in and take that course as a resource. All right. So let's jump into the book. We're on page 229, level 5, the Pinnacle. The highest leadership accomplishment is developing other leaders to level 4. Now remember, a level 4 leader is somebody that can develop other leaders, right? So imagine, if you would, now you're going to develop other leaders to get to level 4, where you're not only developing other leaders, but you're developing leaders that develop leaders. This leads to what John calls in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. It's a law that we'll go over at the end, but that's that growth, right? That almost immeasurable growth that comes up with that. And so, it takes you from an addition mindset to a multiplication mindset. If I can develop leaders, that's great. I'm adding to my circle. If I can develop leaders that also develop leaders, well, it becomes a multiplication example, right? Multiplication is huge. It's like when people say, it's kind of the same, not the same. But someone will say, oh, $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. And then someone says, oh, that's $1 billion, right? Okay, well, do you really understand the difference between a million and a billion? And then someone will say, oh, well, here's what it would be if it was marbles, right? You take a million marbles and it fills up this shipping container. You take 1 billion marbles and it fills up 6 buses or something ridiculous, right? It's like there's a huge difference in that simple exchange of a word. And so that happens with the difference between addition and multiplication. I mean, it's huge. You always hear the term exponential growth, right? What does exponential mean, right? So if you were to take something and square it, right? So let's say that's 10 square feet. 10 square feet is 100 square feet. But now let's say exponential growth, right? Let's add an exponent to that. Let's cube it. Let's say 10 cubed. Well, 10 cubed is 1,000. There's a big difference between a 100 and 1,000, right? And so that's the idea there, right? If you get to the pinnacle of leadership and you are developing leaders that also develop other leaders, you're adding an exponent to your number each time you produce another leader. And that's kind of amazing, right? So we'll go into page 231. He starts out with, rare is the leader who reaches level 5, the pinnacle, right? Obviously, that we said it was rare to get to level 4. So how rare is it to get to level 5, right? A level 5 leader is somebody that commands their space, right? They're just hitting on all cylinders all the time. It says the individuals who reach level 5 lead so well for so long that they create a legacy of leadership in the organizations that they serve. And John in his writings has alluded to different people that he has felt have led a legacy, right? He mentions Jack Welch a lot. He's mentioned Ken Blanchard a lot. He's mentioned, help me, where are my people? John Wooden, right? The basketball coach. He's mentioned that guy a bazillion times in his writings, right? It says level 5 leaders often possess an influence that transcends the organization and the industry the leader works in. So a level 5 leader doesn't just affect, the company. They affect the company and the industry that it's related to, right? So it says most leaders who reach the pinnacle do so later in their careers, obviously, because it takes a lot to build to that level, right? But the pinnacle level is not a resting place for leaders to stop and view their success. It is a reproducing place from which they make the greatest impact of their lives. And, dare I be so bold as to say, I feel that I aspire to become a level 5 leader. I know that I've gotten to be a level 4 leader previously. Remember, each time your circumstances change, you might have to start out again. But each time you start out, it's easier to progress, right? Through your experiences. And so I have an aspiration to become a level 5 leader. And one of the things that he's stressing here is as you become a level 5 leader and you have a group of leaders underneath you producing leaders, that's not the time to pull back and go, oh man, I got the hard work done. It's over. Thank goodness. Phew, right? No, that's not the time. Now's the time to double down, right? Because you're making the most impact you've ever made in your life. So now's the time to really get to it. And so in the John Maxwell method, the way that we've been going through this book, we're going to have upsides, right? So the upside of the pinnacle level of leadership. Then we'll have some downsides of the pinnacle level of leadership. John's real good at the yin and yang, right? He's good at, hey, pluses and minuses, man. We've got to make sure there's balance in how we're thinking of this thing. And so we're going to cover the upside of being a pinnacle leader. We're going to cover the downside of being a pinnacle leader. We'll talk about the best qualities of a pinnacle leader, and we'll talk about how to get from a level 4 to a level 5 leader. Okay? It says pinnacle leadership creates a level 5 organization. Now think about that. Think about where you work now. Think about, if you own a company and you have people underneath you, what level of leadership is your company really operating under? I've made mention before that I've worked for level 1 leaders before. When you're working for a level 1 leader, the organization seems to be constricted or held down to that first level, right? It seems oppressive. The days are long. You're looking at the clock. When is lunch? When is break? When do I get out of here? Right? When you're working for a level 1 leader, it's very difficult to be proactive and optimistic. When you get to level 2, you kind of have a little more buy-in. And when you're working in that situation, you feel like, yeah, I want to do this. Yeah, I can make this better. I can do this thing a little bit better. When you get to level 3 and you like your boss and you like the product and you like the company and morale is going higher, right? You're working at a productive higher rate. Your things are better, right? Morale's good. Things are popping. Everything's going pretty good. And then you get to the point where you're working for a level 4 leader and the boss is saying, hey, man, you've really put in the time. You've put in the work. You've put in the effort. You've put in the energy. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you've put in the time. And you've put in the effort. And you've put in the work. And you You've gotten our department to the next level, right? That you've risen our productivity to another crescendo, right? Another plateau. I want to make you a lead, or I want to, send you to training classes. I want to invest in you and make you more capable of possibly leading others on the team to raise the success of the whole team, right? And so that's kind of what it's like working for a level 4 leader. So remember, whatever level of leadership you are at, that is the restriction or the constriction that you're putting on the people on your team to operate under as well. So a Pinnacle leadership creates a level 5 organization. He makes reference to Jack Welch again, right? It says General Electric has been held up as a business model for decades. Year after year, it is cited by Fortune magazine as a top 10 organization for leadership. Why? Because for many years, it was led by Jack Welch, a level 5 leader. Remember, level 5 leaders, they tend to leave a legacy, right? So, and his emphasis was on developing other leaders to become level 4 leaders. Remember, a level 4 leader produces more leaders, right? Leaders who produce other leaders. Because level 5 leaders empower many people to lead larger, they lift the leadership lid for everyone in the organization. Because they produce lots of leaders and continue to do so over the long haul of their careers, their organizations develop an abundance mindset. Remember, we've talked before in these sessions about the difference between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. If you're operating in a scarcity mindset, like if you think competition opens up in town and they're taking a piece of your pie, instead of thinking, man, I got to bake more pies, well, then you're always going to be held down by a theory of limitation, right? But if you think, man, there's competition in town, I got to bake more pies, I have to look at other opportunities to increase my business flow. Well, then you're working from an abundance mindset and you're ready for opportunity, right? So there's different ways to play the side of the fence there. The second thing is Pinnacle leadership creates a legacy within the organization. And we had just kind of alluded to that when we mentioned Jack Welch, right? He created a legacy of creating leaders within General Electric. And because of leaving such a strong legacy behind, that company has had the good fortune to create a lot of good leaders after Jack Welch, right? Near the end of that section, I highlighted something that says, in level 5 organizations, when the top leader steps down, there are usually many leaders ready to rise up and take the reins, and the organization experiences continuity unfamiliar to organizations with lesser leaders. Now, I'm not going to call them out by name because I don't think that's professional, but I've been associated with companies that, quite honestly, there's cats waiting around just to retire. And when you say, who's going to take your place? Well, we've kind of been milling it around. We think there's a couple of people that might have a shot. Might have a shot? Dude, you're going to retire. Like, you're leaving. There's nothing to hold on to. You're not worried about losing your job. They're not going to cut your contract short, nothing like that. They're going to let you retire. But as a leader, you want to promote, you want to facilitate, succession in your position, to create a legacy, to create the ability for someone to take what you've done and run it up the flagpole, man. Get that thing to operate at a higher level of efficiency, productivity, and profit. But when you are working for positional leaders, they don't focus on others. They focus more on themselves, right? Remember that. And so in level 5 organizations, when the top leader steps down, there are usually many leaders ready to rise up and take the reins. Now think about that. If you've got 5 or 10 people ready to take the reins, you've already been working with them, you've already trained them, you've already built a leadership library in each of those people, right? Will people be disappointed? Will people get angry if they don't get the position? And might they move on to another opportunity or another company somewhere else? Sure, all that could happen. But remember, and I'm going to screw up the saying, but I'm sure you guys recognize the saying, right? It's like, what's worse than training and investing in your people only to have them, leave and go somewhere else? And it's not training them and having them stay, right? So you want to make sure you have people optimized and that people are producing at a high rate for you all the time. And then when leadership does get ready to vacate, leave a position or retire, You've got a warm bench that's ready to get in there and make it happen. And hopefully with some optimism and some fire underneath them to make things happen. If you're working for a company that's based in positional leadership, it becomes more about, well, who's got the most seniority, who's been here the longest, who's been here the shortest, let's do a head count exercise and see if we're really going to keep the team on board or not. Those are the types of things. Whereas if you're working in an abundance mindset and you're being super productive, it's like, hey, this guy's younger. If we put this guy in position, guy, gal, whatever, right? If we put this gal in position, we might be able to add to the head count and create more productivity, more profit, right? So there's all kinds of ways to kind of look at this thing, but a level 5 leader is going to be more based in an abundance mindset and being prepared to vacate his position and have leaders ready to slot in his absence, right? Level 3 says, Pinnacle Leadership provides an extended platform for leading. One of the things that baffled me when I was younger, and when I say younger, I mean like 19, 20, 21 years old, is I would see really dynamic vice presidents, dynamic leaders, and I would see stagnant leaders, right? But the dynamic leaders, they took my attention because I would see them vice president of a company, right? But also the little league coach, on the board at church, a consultant to an association of businesses, related in the field of a company that he might own or be a vice president of. And I would see all these things and I would say, how can that guy be an effective vice president for my company when he's spread so thin all over the place? How can this guy get paid to be on the board of an association when he's already getting a salary here? Why is this guy allowed to double dip? Why, this seems unethical. And these things would cross my mind as a young person. And then as I got older, I began to realize, like it says here, Pinnacle Leadership provides an extended platform for leading. Opportunities come to those that produce. If you were in Amway and someone said, hey, you're in Amway, you're trying to get someone else to join Amway. You're like, hey, you should join my circle. And they say, I'm too busy for that. The response is, well, that's awesome, because busy people got a way of getting things done, right? That's true. Think about any kind of production-oriented atmosphere for employment, right? Let's say something breaks on the assembly line and you need to, replace a belt, right? But the maintenance guy's not there. The shift foreman will invariably go to the most productive person, go to the quickest person with the biggest sense of urgency and say, oh, hey, bro, can you help me out? The belt came off machine number 6. Can you put a new belt on for me? That guy's going to go, dude, I'm busy, right? But he's going to go, yeah, I know you're busy, but man, do you think you could do me a solid? And that guy will invariably get the belt on number 6 and get that line back up and running, right? Because busy people got a way of getting things done. Now, you could take someone that's not very productive, right? Someone producing at a fifth the rate of the person that was busy. You say, hey, man, could you put the belt on machine number 6? And 3 hours later, that guy's still trying to figure out how to tie his shoes, right? So in leadership positions, it's not unusual to look at things from that different perspective. And so when I say that busy people got a way of getting things done, as I've gotten older, I've come to realize that expanding your sphere of influence or extending what we say a platform for leading in this case, that comes with the territory. That's part of the deal, right? So what I highlighted here was people outside of their direct sphere of influence hear about, then seek them out for advice. So what they're saying is, if you become a level 5 leader, people from all walks of life are going to figure out what you do, how you do it, and want to know more information from you, or just have an association with you, right? So people outside their direct sphere of influence hear about them and seek them out for advice. Level 5 leaders are able to cross lines out of their industry or area of expertise to speak with authority. Now, some of this comes true for me already. I make websites and I make training material in the power sports and marine field. That's my specialty. My specialty is, if you're a motorcycle dealership, I can teach you how to increase your service sales. I used to do 2-day clinics that would increase service sales by 47%. Well, now I've got a program where people can join my program for up to a year. So if I could get people to increase their business by 47% over 2 days, what kind of increase do you think we can get when I'm leveraging people over time and investing in them for up to a year, right? So that's my specialty. Now, I've got a friend on the other side of the country who does financial consulting, and he's writing a book and he's doing a lot of other interesting things. And he'll use me as a confidant because I've published a book and because I'm web savvy and because I have experience in these areas, right? People begin to recognize your expertise and then try to leverage you outside of your niche, which is okay. But at some point, you still have to recognize the riches are in the niches, and you got to focus on your strengths, right? And John's talked about that, right? That Pareto law, focus on the top 20% that you're really good at, and that'll create 80% of your return, right? So let's turn over to page 236, and we're finishing up in extending the platform for leading. There's a thing here that says, that I've highlighted, that says, think of the great leaders of government, business, education, and faith. Their influence far exceeds the organizations they led. For examples, he uses Nelson Mandela. He uses Jack Welch, right, from General Electric. He uses Billy Graham, right? Almost everybody, atheist, Christian, Jew, Hindu, almost everyone knows who Billy Graham is, right? Their influence is extensive and their reputations are legendary, right? Then he's got some more stuff where he talks about Albert Einstein and things like that. In fact, the thing for Albert Einstein is interesting. It says one of the Nobel recipients was Albert Einstein. He once said, "Strange is our situation here upon earth. Each of us comes for a short visit, not knowing why. Yet sometimes seeming to divine a purpose. From the standpoint of daily life, however, there is one thing we do know, that man is here for the sake of other men. Above all, for those upon whose smile and well-being our own happiness depends, and also for the countless unknown souls with whose fate we are connected by a bond of sympathy. Many times a day, I realize how much my own outer and inner life is built upon the labors of my fellow men, both living and dead, and how earnestly I must exert myself in order to give, in return, as much as I have received." The reason that jumped off the page and the reason I highlighted that paragraph is because when I think of Albert Einstein, I think of E equals MC squared. I think of a mathematician. I think of a guy that's very calculated in his thinking and less emotional. And when I read this, it's more emotional than calculated, if that makes sense, right? He's saying, I recognize that, for the countless unknown souls with whose fate we are connected by a bond of sympathy. Many times a day I realize how much my own outer and inner life is built upon the labors of my fellow men, both living and dead, right? And he's talking about adding value back to people. And adding value to people is the number one cause we all should have, right? When you talk about the leadership journey, and this is something that kind of came out of the Einstein's example, John talks about learn, earn, and return, right? That's one of those Johnisms, right? Learn, earn, return. People at the start of the journey who are given a position of leadership are faced with a decision. Are they going to learn now to lead better, or are they going to rely on their position, guard their turf, and play king of the hill to maintain what they've got, right? So hopefully you're going to choose to learn. Those who choose to learn enter the learning phase and start to slowly climb up the levels of leadership. Typically, when they reach the production level, they begin to receive recognition and the rewards of leadership. That would be the earning, right? That's when most leaders enter the earning phase. Many are content to stay there. They climb the ladder in the organization, they have the respect of their peers, and they earn a good living. Only those leaders who decide to give back to others and develop leaders enter the returning phase. Leaders who dedicate themselves to developing more leaders and pour themselves into the task, giving their best energies and resources to raise up other leaders, are the only ones who have a chance to move up to the pinnacle of leadership, right? So those are the three upsides, right? So just kind of to review that, we said that pinnacle leadership creates a level 5 organization. We said that pinnacle leadership creates a legacy within the organization. And we said that Pinnacle Leadership provides an extended platform for leading. So what would be the downsides? The downsides of level 5 leadership is being on the pinnacle can make you think you've arrived, right? Now, realistically, you did arrive. Pat yourself on the back, right? If you're a level 5 leader and you're teaching people how to lead others and build leaders out of a group, that's amazing stuff. You've arrived, but you can acknowledge it, but don't gloat about it. That's not what makes you you. What makes you you is how you add value to others, right? And so the minute you make it all about you, you begin to fail at the pinnacle level of leadership. In fact, Jim Collins wrote, he has a book called How the Mighty Fall. And Jim Collins wrote that those who fall often have an entitlement mindset bolstered by arrogance. He wrote that for such leaders, success is viewed as deserved rather than fortuitous, fleeting, or even hard-earned in the face of daunting odds. People begin to believe that success will continue almost no matter what the organization decides to do or not to do, right? And so when it becomes all about you, that becomes a problem. Number 2, being on the pinnacle can lead you to believe your own press. This is a kind of a longer section, so I want to shorten this up and just kind of make the words what I take from this. When he says believe your own press, what he's saying is when you get really good at something, people have a tendency to exaggerate the good sides. They have a tendency to brag or to bolster what is reality. And it's very, very dangerous to start believing the hype rather than what is real. You want to stay grounded and you want to stay, realistic as to what your contribution is. And you can't let yourself begin to think, oh, I made all this magic happen, because, you are training a team that is achieving magic, but you didn't make all the magic happen, right? So you want to be really careful about, your mental attitude and where that comes from. And it kind of leads back to, making you think that you've arrived, right? Because being arrogant and things like that. We don't want that to happen. It says, no level 5 leaders are as good as people give them credit for, and no leaders, no matter how long they've led, are above the laws of leadership. Those 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, that foundational book that he wrote, those last no matter what. So you got to be really careful when you get to the pinnacle level of leadership. Don't let it get to your head, and don't believe the hype that other people are pumping you up with. Got to keep your head about you. Number 3, it says being on the pinnacle can make you lose focus. Remember what I was saying earlier about a vice president that might be, doing something with Little League, on a board, helping out at church, doing a bunch of other things. You want to make sure that you don't lose focus on where your successes are, right? Get back to that Pareto law and go, I need to focus. I can do other things, but my focus needs to be on the top 20% that drives my success, right? And so it says when leaders reach level 5, the number of opportunities they receive becomes extraordinary. Everyone wants to hear what such leaders have to say, but many of these opportunities are really little more than distractions. And then what he does is he uses, in Good to Great, Jim Collins tells a story to illustrate how this can happen. And he uses a real life situation. And it's almost embarrassing because the person that he uses for the illustration of this is really highly regarded, right? So I don't want to talk smack about him, right? But let's reference for the material that's in the book. I'm on page 241 for those following along. He's talking about Lee Iacocca. Lee Iacocca went into Chrysler and he turned that company around. Now I'm older, so I remember when that happened. I remember when Chrysler almost shut down, right? And then the K car came out, and the Reliant K, people were driving around, right? And the Reliant station wagons. And then they started talking about cab forward designs and, all these things. All of this stuff was happening under Lee Iacocca's reign. And at the time, he grew Chrysler to be a giant corporation. It says Chrysler rose to a height of 2.9 times the market at the point about halfway through his tenure. So it was almost closed. He takes it all the way up here, right? And he gets to be famous. he gets profiled in over 80 TV commercials for the company. He was on talk shows, almost weekly. He was on some talk show somewhere, and he had really done a good job of promoting his own celebrity through the successes that he experienced at Chrysler. And he's a very, very intelligent person, and the work that he did was fantastic. I don't want to take that away from him, but what happened was he started here, he went to here, and then for the second half of his tenure, things started to come back down. Okay. What made it come back down? Well, he kind of lost focus. He wasn't concentrating on maintaining that high level anymore. He was more worried about the self-marketing, if I could say that. And, I'm not in his brain. I don't know what he was really thinking about, but he didn't have the ability to focus on the healthy succession of growth that the company had received because he was doing too many other obligations, right? So John puts here, no matter where you are in your leadership journey, never forget what got you where you are won't get you to the next level, right? Never forget what got you where you are won't get you to the next level. You've always got to be focused on what's the next thing. How can I get better? How can I get better? When you sit back on your laurels and you think you've nailed it, sometimes when you think you've nailed it, everyone else starts to catch up to you, right? Remember that piece of the pie thing? Lee needed to keep making pies. And instead he's like, we got enough pie. And then everyone else started to catch up and take pieces of that pie, right? So those are the pros and the cons. Those are the pluses and the minuses of leadership, right? Now, I recovered the pluses, so let's recover the downside. The downside is being on the pinnacle can make you think you've arrived. Being on the pinnacle can lead you to believe your own press, and being on the pinnacle can make you lose focus, okay? So what are the best behaviors when you're on level 5? When you're at the pinnacle of leadership, what behaviors make that awesome, right? Well, the first thing John's got is he says, make room for others at the top. This is the opposite of what a positional leader would do, right? A positional leader would want to protect his position. He'd say, I don't know about that guy. I don't think I trust him. I better handle that, right? Whereas a level 5 leader would be like, not only do I want to delegate this to you, but I would like you to have a team of people that you can show how this works to, right? And so making room for others at the top is key. And remember, we were talking about exponential growth. We want the company or the project or the organization to grow. We don't want it to shrivel, right? And so making room for people at the top is the best way to have things grow and have people be excited to keep getting better. It says, wouldn't having more leaders create less room? Because that's what a lot of people think. The answer is no. Here's why. When you develop a leader who develops other leaders, you create more room at the top because you increase the size and power of the entire organization. You've got to remember, when I train up a leader, that leader is going to attract followers. And then if I pick a leader out of that group of followers, that leader is going to attract followers. And then things are going to continue to grow and grow and grow, right? So if we break this into subsections, right, about making room for others at the top, it talks about a leader's desire. A leader's desire is being succeeded instead of needed. You, as a leader, you always want to focus on who is going to take over when you leave. You always want to build, you always want to train your replacement, all right? So the leader's desire is being succeeded instead of needed. A leader's focus is working on people's strengths instead of weaknesses. That is something that I employed when I was working at Suzuki. I had a person that did graphics that focused on graphics. I had a person that was a subject matter expert mechanically, and they focused on being a subject matter expert for everything mechanical, right? And by being able to let people focus on their strength, I was able to pick up productivity of the whole team. Instead of forcing a mechanical guy to be a computer genius or trying to teach a computer person, how an engine works, I just focused on letting each one focus on their strengths. And then that led everyone to be more productive. Okay. The leader's attitude is giving away power instead of hoarding it. Now, if you've read the book, The 360-Degree Leader, which is one of my favorite books by John Maxwell, there are certain limitations that you run into as a leader coming up, right? Remember, you have a lid on your leadership, right? The lid, right? The law of the lid's the first law in the 21 irrefutable laws. But that lid can either be created by you or can be created by a superior above you. And so it says a leader's attitude is giving away power instead of hoarding it. In some cases, looking at a 360-degree leadership example, you might be middle management. You might be a middle leader in an organization, and you might have someone that's a lower level leader above you. You might be a level 4 leader, but if you've got a level 2 or a level 3 leader above you, a lot of the actions that you need to take to stay in position actually relegate you down to that level 2 leadership, right? And so there'll be a lot of examples where you might know the right way to lead somebody, but the people you lead might not see it because of the example that you have to do with the people above you. Okay, using 360-degree leadership skills, you can begin to chip away at both sides of those restrictions, right? Lead up and lead down. You can begin to take the edge off of that, but it takes a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of patience, and in the end, not everyone will recognize what you've been trying to do, and it could backfire on you. I've had that happen to me before, but I want to make sure that I at least discuss it and put it out in the open, right? But a leader's attitude, a good leader, isn't afraid to give away power. Why? Because the more he gives away, the more he receives. Okay. The leader's perspective is seeing potential leaders as they could be instead of as they are. It's so easy to be disappointed. It's so easy to be critical. What takes skill is to look at something through the critical nature and go, there's potential in there. I can help that person develop, and then try to develop that person. And the reward for that internally is huge. I can tell you firsthand, that's an amazing sensation to have. The leader's impact is knowing what it takes, knowing it takes a level 5 leader to develop a level 4 leader. And, you're not going to teach another leader how to train other leaders until you're a level 5 leader yourself that can do it successfully, right? Now, the second thing in those behaviors was continually mentor potential level 5 leaders. If you get to level 5 leadership, if you're at the pinnacle of leadership, remember it's climb the ladder, hold the ladder, build the ladder, right? We talked about that in the leadership. So continually mentor potential level 5 leaders. You're always looking for that person to bring up the ladder with you. You're always looking to not go alone, but to bring, that leadership dance we've talked about multiple times. You want to bring people with you. Okay. There's a couple of things here. It says, thinking about the importance of mentoring, John came to a couple of conclusions, and there's just 2 of them. It says you have to have a lot of good leaders to select the best leaders. When you're building your team, you have to look for people that have leadership potential. They might not be active leaders, but they have to have leadership potential, and you want to have, a good menu of that on hand to choose from. Second, it says you must give your best to all potential level 5 leaders, because you may be surprised who finishes the strongest, right? And when he says that, he's using a real life example from Jack Welch. When Jack Welch was getting ready to leave General Electric, they took a whole group of people. In fact, I think it is in here. Yep, it is in here. So it says, recently I attended an interview between my friend Bill Hybels and former General Electric CEO Jack Welch. Bill was asking Welch questions about succession. And Welch said that a few years before he exited General Electric, he made a list of potential successors. The list included 3 categories: leaders on the inside track, leaders with potential, and long shots. And he named several people. As he spoke, I began to wonder how he was able to choose from the inside track leaders. But before I could go very far into my thinking, Welch amazed me by mentioning that a successor had come from the long shot category, right? Don't immediately rule people out or assume they can't. Look for possibilities, look for potential. And in the end, that might be the person that surprises you, right? It says, if you reach level 5, you have a much greater responsibility. No one other than a level 5 leader can raise up other level 5 leaders. And remember that exponential growth is dependent upon that. So if a company is going to sustain major forms of growth, you've got to be someone that can find other potential successful leaders like yourself. That takes us over to page 248, item number 3 in this section. Create an inner circle that will keep you grounded. The law of the inner circle comes from the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, and it's super, super important. Without covering the whole section, I'll go down to the last section that I highlighted, and it says on level 5, a good inner circle will allow leaders to be themselves. That's huge. So many times in leadership, you have to be the person your staff needs you to be, which isn't always your natural self, right? So you need to have an inner circle where you can be yourself. It says these things keep the journey enjoyable, prevent loneliness, and keep leaders from developing hubris, right? Developing hubris is, stagnation. And here's the good news. The people in your inner circle can become your favorite people, like family. Remember, when you have someone in your inner circle, they can hold you accountable, right? When you grant someone access to the inner circle, you give them certain entitlements and responsibilities, and part of that is keeping you accountable. It's making sure that that you're not a dirtbag, right? That you don't become arrogant and that you don't believe your own hype. And sometimes it takes a real friend to ground you back, and that's one of those things that you definitely want to have. Number 4, it says do things for the organization that only a level 5 leader can do, right? And that's huge. It says being on level 5 allows a leader to see and do things that cannot be done from any other place in leadership. Some of these things are obvious. If you're the top leader in the organization, you need to guide it. You need to be a good model to everyone in the organization by valuing people, continuing to grow, practicing the golden rule, being authentic, and exhibiting good values and living out the right priorities. If you work for a company that, say, is doing like a drive on work ethics or a drive on diversity in the workplace, or and they say these things, or they might even write documents that purport to be advocates of these things, but then you see in their own nature and you see in their own behavior that that's just not true. It just doesn't resonate with that which is factual. You find yourself debating, right? Like what's going on here? And so in this instance, when he says do things for the organization that only level 5 leaders can do, that's what they're referring to. Number 5 is a plan for succession. We've already talked about that, but it says true leaders put ego aside and strive to create successors who go beyond them, and then plan to hand off the baton of leadership in stride when they are still running at their peak. If a leader has already begun to slow down, the baton is being handed off too late. If you are coming up on retirement and losing your steam and you haven't picked a successor yet, get on the ball, pick a successor, make life happen, train your replacement, and give them the opportunity to excel past the mark that you let them take control, right? If you wait until you're gone and let the company try and put the pieces together in your absence, you've set the successor up for failure, which is not fair. It says leave a positive legacy. That's number 6. And that drives us over to the laws of leadership at the pinnacle level. Each of these sections, all the levels, 1, 2, 3, and 4, they've all had what laws of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, what laws fit that level. And so when we get to law 5, obviously there's a fair amount of laws that fit, but let's just be specific. All the laws of leadership fit if you're a level 5 leader, but the ones that are especially pertinent to level 5 leadership, one would be the law of respect, right? People naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. Another law would be the law of intuition. Leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias, right? Because you're responsible for other people. The law of timing. When to lead is important as what to do and where to go, right? A sense of timing is valuable. The whole time that I was dating my wife before we got married, one of her phrases was timing is everything. Timing is everything. Timing is everything. She would say it all the time. How come you didn't want to date me before? Well, timing's everything, right? And so, when we got married, timing was everything. When we had our first child, timing is everything. And so that's something that definitely is a large part of my existence today. Another law, the law of legacy. I think we covered that pretty hardcore in this section. So the law of legacy. And then remember when I talked about multiplicity, when I talked about exponential growth, the phrase that John uses in the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership is explosive growth, right? The law of explosive growth, right? And then it talks about helping others move up from level 4 and from level 5. And here's what I'm going to do, folks. I talked about taking these and making this into a course that goes up on the Mañana No Mas Academy. And if we take a look at where I just led to, oh boy, there's still, yep, there we go. Wow, legacy. There is still this much book left, okay? This much. So 256 to 287 where notes start, right? So roughly 30 pages of book. That 30 pages of book is going to create worksheets, notes, different forms possibly that you might fill in on the Academy, but they'll be more interactive. And what I wanted to do is kind of build that as a resource for folks. And so as we take this content and we drill it down and we put it back up into the Mañana No Mas Academy, I want you to know that as you get to the end of the sessions, there'll be resources that you can get to, and it'll be tools to help you assess where you're at and what the next steps might be. And folks, I just want to share with you how humbling it is. I know that especially if you're watching this in the replay, you might be thinking, well, this is weird. He's just making videos. Why is he talking about being humble? I didn't grow up wealthy. I didn't grow up entitled. I didn't grow up, ahead of anybody. And the idea that I could put in some work, some study, a little dedication, some time, and then be in a position to share this kind of content with a lot of people, that's humbling. That's humbling. And there are times where when I take a look at what we're doing here with Mañana No Mas and I see how we're trying to grow an academy that adds value to people, that helps people become the best leaders they can possibly be. And got to remember, I mean, my niche is power sports and marine, but we're also in the fitness niche, right? So power sports, marine, fitness, those are big categories. And then you bring in, business leadership and things like that. And you can see how this audience begins to grow and grow and grow. And it becomes humbling that I'm the one that gets to share this stuff with you. I encourage you, if you are watching the replays, go through the whole thing, do the assets at the end, do the resources. And, I would say that if you have any questions, comments, concerns, hit the contact link on the Mañana No Mas page. But realistically, once you're in the Learning Center, you'll be able to connect with other students. There's a social learning portal in there, and you can friend other people. You can talk to them. You can message them. You can send pictures, all kinds of things. There's a whole social aspect to the training site that, quite honestly, a lot of people miss. And so as this thing grows and continues to pick up steam, that is one part of the site that I will continue to mention and push. Folks, I thank you so much for sticking it out. If you've started from the beginning and you've gotten until the end here, congratulations to you. That's saying something. If you don't mind, I would like to close this out in prayer. I like to do that at the end of these courses. If you're not a believer and you don't want to hang around for that, you could sign out now and your video is done, and that would be the end of this. But for people that are believers or for people that are seeking that, I would like to close this out in prayer and give us some stability in that regard. Okay. All right. Father God, I thank you for bringing us to the conclusion of level 5 of 5 levels of leadership with John C. Maxwell. Father, I'm so thankful that the wisdom John shares through his words. Father, I'm thankful for the words. I'm thankful for the training. I'm thankful for the time I've gotten to spend with John in understanding this stuff. Father, I'm grateful for being able to share it with others. God, I pray that they employ themselves. I pray that they push themselves to understand things better, to move forward and to add value to others wherever possible. Father, I pray for the leaders of our country. Father, whether you're right, left, or center, there is something happening right now that just needs your guiding hand. Father, I pray that peaceably we would come to terms and move on to the next stage of leadership within our country. And Father, I also pray for the economic stabilization of our country as it has been rocked by this COVID crisis and people being sick. Father, for those that are sick, I pray for them. For people that are battling other illnesses besides COVID, Father, I also hold them up to you. And Father, I know that your will be done, but I also know that this time has been driving a lot of people to you. And so, Father, maybe that is your will. Father, I pray for our health. I pray for our well-being. I pray for the success of Manana Namas. And I pray for the people that are in it, that they would continue to find value here and be able to add value to others. Amen. All right, folks, that closes us out. And I say it all the time. I love you guys. I'll see you on the inside. Bye-bye.